Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of Coffee with Khalipa, short form podcast where we dive into something I'm thinking about this upcoming week. And of course, we should all be drinking a little bit of coffee. Topic of conversation for today is this idea of talking through a radio. Now, you might be sitting there and be like, dude, I don't need to talk through a radio. I could use a phone, I could use Slack, I could use something else. But the analogy really came from an Echelon Front course I did. It was on leadership. And one of the big takeaways I had from Leif Babin, who was one of the instructors, was this idea that before he communicated with his troops, and he was he was a SEAL, he was overseas, he would think about what he said before he said it based on the individual's perspective. So one of the things that I'm really working on is detaching from my ego, detaching from my emotion, and detaching from my perspective before making a decision. It's something I'm really focused on right now. But the idea of the radio is all about the perspective. So what he was saying is, if he's overseas, let's just say he's trying to get a bad guy, and he says, hey, there's someone in the window. Well, if all of his guys are dispersed around, where's the window? What's the window? What are you talking about? It would just create confusion. Instead, before he hit that radio button, he would think, he would take a pause, he'd step back, look around and make a decision and say, hey, what can I say to clearly communicate my position? So he would say, hey, in the northwest corner of, area 2 or whatever, in the third floor, in the far right window, we have an enemy combatant, for example. This way, no matter where someone is, no matter what perspective they come from, they're gathering the same information. And so when I'm thinking about this from a business practical perspective from our gyms, I'm thinking, how am I communicating on Slack or text or email? I might say something like, that wasn't a good job, let's just say, which I wouldn't say, but let's just say I did say that. Well, to them, they might say, well, what wasn't a good job? Am I talking about mopping the floor, coaching my class? What was it? And so instead, when I'm learning to communicate better and detaching from my perspective, I'm thinking about how is someone else going to view this information and how can I clearly communicate it so that regardless of what perspective they're coming from, they can understand that information in a more tangible way. It's a really practical thing to assume that when you're talking through a radio. And when you think about it through that lens, it requires you to have a concise, clear message with a purpose that anyone can understand. And I think looking at it like that, I think it'll just help relationships, because oftentimes, even as the owner of a company, you might say something, but your employees come to it from a different perspective. They haven't worked there as long. They don't have as much ownership in the actual company, like actual ownership. And so they might see information different than you do. But if you look at it through multiple different perspectives, through different lenses, and detaching from your own before you make that call, I think that's the key. So case in point, something I'm really thinking about, detaching from the ego, emotion, and also in this particular case, detaching from your perspective. Now, I hope you like these Coffee Khalipas. If you do, simple ask, go back, rate it, review it, share it with a friend. It makes a huge impact on us and would mean a lot to us. Keep crushing it. See you again next week. Let's go.